The Maccabian Janissaries. Realization. The room was spacious, but entirely empty but for two large chairs. Simultaneously, two doors opened at either end of the room, and one man walked through each portal, a line of servitors following them. From one party, the servitors carried stacks of paperwork. On the other, there was barely a page to be had for each servitor. On the top of each of the pages was a single title: Maccabian Janissary Dispositions. The two walked to meet each other and bowed to exactly the same degree, at exactly the same time, then straightened and took the additional pace and clasped hands in welcome. The two looked so similar, dressed in ceremonial robes of high office. One was marked with the sigils of the Administratum, the other with that of the MYTHOLOGY. The Administratum official was the one where the servitors' arms were filled with papers, the MYTHOLOGY the one lacking for their thralls. The two smiled at each other and traded a few moments of small talk. How was their family member? How was their arboretum? They had done this so many times over the centuries, for both were recipients of rejuvenation and longevity treatments. They knew the dance, trusted each other as much as any could when dealing with an operative of another wing of the mighty Imperium. Then, finally, they got to the reason of the meeting, and the servitors approached and passed papers to the men. Then they conversed in earnest. The Administratum delegate sighed at his readouts, and then stated wistfully, "Do you remember when we used to have these meetings before? How our places were reversed, opposite. Me bringing the staggering reams, the reports of their losses, you having but meagre requisition orders. Indeed. It has always been tedious," stated the MYTHOLOGY official. "I did not look forward to these bi-decadal meetings before. It's been too long. We both know this is no fluke, no flash in the pan. Not after this long. No, it is not. And it is only getting worse. It is. I am glad you see it too. I feel so odd about this. Surely, we should be cheering, should we not? I know, I feel it too. Half of me sees this as a light in the overwhelming darkness. The other half sees it as a potential calamity of unfathomable proportions. Well put. But what if the Ministorum truly takes stock? They knew this before we did. They must have. It can only be the Primarch, then. Primarchs. Aye, true. It's all so new. The first returning as well. I cannot believe it. We should sing praises to their names, give thanks to the Emperor. Of course, for their return. No, not just for that. For their returning now. You think it is only they who prevent? Well, the obvious. Yes, if they are not on their knees in supplication, even they cannot move against the returned blessed sons. True, but for how long? The way things are going? A century maximum, surely. We could ask for the services of the Minotaurs. I fear it might take a lot more than a single chapter. Even the Minotaurs. A lot more. We could cut off resources. And turn a possibility into a certainty? No. We have the Scions as well. Perhaps we should place them back onto the front lines properly? But we have as always, we are the most accommodating to their preferences for the most rugged of theatres. They should have been dying at the same rate. Oh, yes. Oh, indeed. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and faces of the Warhammer 40K setting, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. Today, we shall be taking a look at what I suspect is a line of reasoning that has not been followed thus far, even amongst the ever-growing constellation of my peers. As today, I shall go fully off script. Yes, there will be hard lore as always, but the reframing of this lore is now fundamentally important. But why? Because I like to link the dots and cast a fresh perspective on the details that have not yet been drawn together. And something has gotten into my craw a little lately, just a tad, and I feel guilty almost, as I seem in some small way to have contributed to it. For there is a myth so loudly trumpeted, so often repeated, so aggrandized, that I find it somewhat irksome. And it is this: that the death corps of Krieg are the most fanatical, the most suicidal, the most courageous warriors in the Astra Militarum. Ha! Oh, they are mighty, their deeds laudable, and their metal is iron. Yet they are tactical warriors, trained on the fields of Krieg and live fire exercises, giving them skills and attributes that make them superlative warriors. They will march towards an enemy line if required, but unless their officer is an idiot, which is rare for Krieg, then they will do so with skill. The Kriegsman unit is almost psychic in its coordination, discipline, and compatibility. They know how to survive. And yes, they're doughty and almost unbreakable. Almost. But the drama of a Kriegsman charging a veteran of the Long War with a shovel in hand will, in the setting, garner only one result: a snapped Kriegsman, often in many pieces. And Krieg does not breed idiots. But do not fear, I'm not telling you to quit the memes. Just give them to their true owners. For today, we shall discuss a regiment that will never break, will never run, will never back down, will accept any losses, will continue on and on, even when others might be disbanded and resettled or even sent home. No. These men fight unto the last of their number. They do not complain. They do not count their losses. They recall the names of their fallen brothers and smile to one another, as they are jealous of the glorious dead. For they are with the God Emperor of mankind, and in the very phalanxes of the living Saint Drusus. And their lore is old. So let us now update it. No fabrications, no embellishments that take them from the path or established lore. This is just their logical update, bringing them into the scope of the age Indomitus, and then stating exactly what would be their new circumstances and their new-found potence. For gentle listener, student of the Imperium and all of its enemies, both within and without, when all is said and done, I challenge you to refute my logic. And perhaps, just perhaps, we can agree to give this regiment the standing it should always have had. As today, we shall be talking about the bravest of the brave. Each man amongst them is said to be the equivalent of the raw talent and determination of an Adeptus Astartes aspirant. Each man is said to be armed and armoured every bit as well as a force of the elite Tempestus Scions. Each man is now a thing as terrifying as their previous superiors, but now almost contemporaries in power, the Adeptus Sororitas. For these are the Maccabian Janissaries. And so, gentle listener, let us kick off the proceedings with a swift tale to whet the appetite and set the scene. But have no fear, watch on. There will be more dotted throughout, I assure you. From the Bold Library. Confessions. I worked hard. For a decade I stove. Once, there were regular ships, lots of opportunities. Now, hardly any. So I had to work harder than anyone else on my planet. Millions of us. Millions who wanted this one thing. To go there. To give homage. To pray before the statues. To give thanks. Some might even dream to become one of St. Drusus's own warriors. But not I. I prayed, remembered my scriptures word for word. No action for the cardinal was too small for me. No deed done without absolute devotion. I would not waste my time dreaming of an impossibility. I would just do this. And somehow, I managed it. To be chosen. To be able to go on the pilgrimage to Maccabeus Quintus. Only 100 of us from this continent would go. But I knew I had to be one of them. My first memory is when I heard of his greatness, how he smashed the Xenos, crushed the traitors, broke the unrighteous over his knee. Drusus, the living saint. And from that moment onwards, all I wanted was to say, thank you. And when it finally happened, I was shocked that I was one of them. Me. My goal had been realized, but I still could not believe it. I did not begrudge the months in flight. I did not mind being crammed in so tight that there was barely room to lay down to sleep. I did not mind that when we did, it was in the urine and feces we had expelled. Always hungry, always cramped. Yet, it was nothing to me. I was going. I would be able to walk where he walked, to see the skies that witnessed his rebirth. I would touch the very ground that Drusus himself stood on. And it was everything I had dreamed of. More. The huge statuary, the long marches of temples and sanctified marble avenues. I wept when I saw him, all in gold and silver. I screamed my devotion to the god emperor. And over the time, somehow, I was chosen again. We were all marched into arenas, tested and retested, we pilgrims. For stamina, for courage, for speed, for skill. And I was brought into the ranks of the militia itself. But it kept on happening. I did what I was instructed. I obeyed without thought, without reservation. Every breath I took, every step taken, every act or action performed, I did to my fullest, as a devotional to him, to Drusus. I, like trillions of humans in this region, only did so because of him, because of Drusus. But strangely, this was all that was needed. This was enough. I could never understand why. It was so easy to give in, to become filled with his light, his example. Why could others not do this? And so, yet again, I was chosen. Again, I was blessed. And I became one of them. The dream I never was able to even wish to dream. The hope I knew could never become reality. It did. I was one of them. The training was hard, but again, I just did as I was instructed. I did what the God Emperor and his saint would want. I obeyed. So many died in the training, so many lost their light to fatigue or misunderstanding. They failed because they lacked the one thing that made me so potent. They died because they lacked faith. And now, I was a Maccabian Janissary. It is true that the Maccabian Janissaries are all recruited from the pilgrims that arrive on Maccabeus Quintus. They are zealots before they receive their first day of boot camp, drawn from the best of the militia, forged in harsh drills that leave many dead. They are the Janissaries. Now we must discuss the basics of the history of this force, where they came from, why, and what it means. It all began with the Angevine Crusade. I shall give a précis of the details. It won't take long. The Imperium sometimes raises its banners to expand its territory. This was such an event. In the year 332 millennium 39, Praetor Gulgena Angevine was a noble on the homeworld, Holy Terror, and he managed to get himself elevated to Lord Militant of the Astra Militarum. A high rank indeed, and with it, he also managed to gain approval from the High Lords of Terror to go forth and bring the light of the Emperor to the darkness beyond his realm. And this was no small thing, as elements of the Crusade were drawn from the Sol system and the deep core worlds of the Imperium, and supported by some of the most potent forces the Emperor commands. Billions of Astra Militarum men and women, tanks, artillery and support. Titan Legios Ventor and Magna, the Black Templars, Tigers Argent, Sons of Medusa and Charnel Guard Space Marines. And they had extensive use of rogue traders and explorator fleets to scout ahead of the onrushing crusade. This was designated not only a crusade, but also a war of faith, to bring the word of the Emperor to the darkness. Hence, huge amounts of frateris militia were also permitted to be mustered. Under the decree passive, men cannot usually be armed while serving the Adeptus Ministorum, the Holy Church. Yet, in these instances, crusades or wars of faith, then they can be marshalled and break the decree that usually means that only the sisters of the Adeptus Sororitas can march beneath a holy banner of the imperial cult. This was a radical and aggressive, fanatical crusade, aren't they all? But the result was a really stupendous mess. For rarely can the fanatic take heed of the wisdom of his peers, and with so many all in one place, only victory could hold them together. Something that started well, but soon fractured into factionalism when the progress slowed, then stopped. Because when the warriors of God are not successful, then they look for the traitors and the unclean, who have somehow counteracted the divine blessing that guarantees victory. The crusade initially took many worlds, smashing and exterminating 3 entire Xenos races, and one of them was not small, the U-Vath, something I shall get into in more detail in the future. And when reinforcements were sent from Terra as a reward for such progress, the crusade had a second wind. And all of this time, a name began to rise in prominence amongst the 2 prongs of the assault. General Drusus. Hundreds of worlds fell to the inexorable march of the Imperial Crusade, yet greed for glory ruined everything. Extending the breadth of the crusade, it lost its impetus, its forward motion, and casualties became eye-watering. The crusade had stalled, as colonists from Terra were arriving in the newly freed region, and this meant that they had to be protected. Orc onslaughts and Xenos raiders threatened the new colonies endlessly, always striking from beyond the reaches of the crusade. And the crusade went from wrathful warriors to garrison and firefighting duties. Rebellions swept across the newly taken regions, and dire portents were seen the length and breadth of the region, causing even greater drains on the existing manpower of the crusade, who now had to put down insurrections as well as fighting off the Xenos. The lack of success meant the fanatical leadership caused the crusade to fracture, as Angevine gave too much authority and autonomy to his regional officers. There was no cohesion and no direction, and infighting broke out almost instantly. The only officer still holding sway over more than just his own divisions was, of course, Drusus. Yet, while defending the planet Maccabeus Quintus, he was then slain in a surprise attack by the enemy. Some say he was annihilated by a demon. Some say he was removed by an Imperial assassin. In either case, it was not permanent. I know. From the dead, Drusus rose again, this time infused with the power and light of the Emperor himself, and his name soon became legend, and his authority swiftly grew. A large section of the crusade declared him a living saint, and he mustered as many forces as he could around Maccabeus, and then led them out into a third and final wave of the crusade. It went well, yet the courtly intrigues continued, and Angevine himself was assassinated. Drusus was the only choice for his replacement, a role he took on with pride and conviction. The crusade was always being attacked by a terrible race of Xenos named the U-Vath, but finally, they were defeated. Their race was excoriated and their home given the Exterminatus decree. Nothing would live there ever again. And with that final victory in place, Drusus finally signalled that the crusade was complete. Drusus, lauded by all of Terra, was given the newly formed Calixis sector as his fiefdom. Drusus ruled well, and then died of natural causes as its lord. And upon his passing, he was formally declared an imperial saint. It took nearly a century, of course, but the die was cast. And in so doing, the planet on which he regenerated was dubbed a shrine world. And from there, it was all history. A shrine world is a serious business, in all meanings of the word. It is an entire world set aside to the devotion of either the god emperor or of a saint, usually. But they do vary. Many will concentrate on resource harvesting pilgrims or locals. Others will create for a vacation. But this was the place that saw the rebirth of the Lord Drusus, the Saint of War. Between every palace, between every church, a martial cadence beat at its heart. And every piece of armour or weaponry was a devotional, a sacrifice to the god emperor in his aspect of war. And the army that they raised on this world, the Maccabian Janissaries, was superlatively armed because of it. With a heavier version of the lasgun, which makes it appear more like a bolter, it really stuck out. And each army had a huge amount of melters, plasmas, and missile launcher weaponry, as heavily equipped as the Scions, but in an entire army. The most distinct thing, of course, was their mask. Not unheard of, for the Blood Angels were known to wear them as well, but rarely, if ever, an entire army from a world. It has enhanced senses, it provides a little armour, but is fixed to support it. This made them dangerous shock troops before, but back then, they would simply keep attacking until gone or victorious. But now, their faith in the Emperor is unshakable, but it must now also be a weapon. One perhaps not as honed, but most certainly the equal of the Sisters of Battle. Priests are they, warrior monks amongst the ranks, and surely, as things now stand, of all of his worthy and faithful warriors, why would the Emperor not bless the Maccabeans? Righteousness. I stand shoulder to shoulder with my brothers. We march. To our sides are the lesser regiments, those who lack faith. those who lack steel. And we march right into the fiercest fire from the enemy, as we always request. A traitor world, a bunch of sacrilegious ne'er-do-wells who turn their back on the Emperor and now bow before repugnant beings. This is their land, so they tout, so they shout. But this is not so. For all of the galaxy belongs to him, to the Emperor, and we shall remind them of this. As we march across the plain, they open up. Thuds and explosions resound through the air. Plumes of red and yellow consuming fire burst amongst the lines to our left and right. But we are not struck, not directly. The explosions appear above us, but none penetrates the holy faith we hold. The priests stand with the commissars at the very front of our ranked advance. They blare out hymnals as they take to the skies and float above us as we advance. One opens his book and reads the litanies of hate, the rites of extermination, and the fires of holy wrath grow as we march. The enemy now stand at the edge of their trenches, firing at us directly. Some of us fall. We march over their bodies. It is all as he intends it. The weak and faithless will fall. The righteous will pass through the yoke of fire. It is then that we hear it, the howl of something ungodly, and its screech is taken up by the masses behind the enemy lines. They burst forth. They are red. Xenos beings of red, carrying curved swords and with horns and teeth everywhere. We hear the wailing that comes from the left and right of our own lines. The cowards stop. They shudder. And they begin to flee. We do not. Our commissar turns and shouts his one order. Fix bayonets! As one, we do this. We obey. Yet I smile. Behind my mask, I want to sing, I want to laugh. For as we bring out our guns into the charging position, a light shines from each blade. A holy white pure light. It blazes from each edge as it is blessed by the Emperor and his holy saint Drusus. We fire into the onrushing scum. It kills too few of them. But as they close, we do not hunker down. We do not huddle. The commissar gives the only order we would want to obey. Charge! And we do. Without hesitation, with great vigor. We want this. I want this. And I get what I want. The priest now rises further, away from the harm of these scum. He calls down lightning from the skies, which smashes their lines as they advance. Yet he also showers us with the blessings of the God Emperor. And we move at speeds no normal man can run. We hit the enemy at this ludicrous, holy speed, and cut through them like children. They are fast and leap and caper, but we are blessed. We match them thrust for thrust, cut for cut, beheading for beheading. Our shining bayonets cut through them as if they were paper. And we march on. They dissolve as they are dealt with, and within a quarter of an hour, though it feels like days, we now stand on an open field. All of these red aliens that disappear, they are gone. And then the traitors watched on, and now they break. Seeing what we have done to their masters, they run. And we march into the hive. We, the Janissaries. We take our time. We search every room, corridor, hab and bay. And we get them all. It takes months. For Drusus. For the Emperor. We get them all. The Janissaries are fanatics every bit as terrifying as the Black Templars, because of their numbers. But when you add them together, The power of the Ministorum has risen almost exponentially. The Maccabeans, the orders militant of the Adeptus Sororitas, and the least codex-compliant Astartes numerically, the Black Templars. Those are huge forces, almost inconceivably entrenched in every segmentum of the Imperium, with tendrils lashing across every notable world, frontier, or social strata. And if the ecclesiarchy also engage fraternist brotherhoods? Aye, let us hope that the imperial cult can be contained by the sons of the Emperor returned, or a conflict as terrible as the Horus heresy could well be only a heartbeat away. Because miracles breed believers, and with each battle the sisters or the Janissaries win, they convert more to the deep fanaticism of the living will of the Emperor Ascendant. And then, nothing may be able to stop them. Now many will say, so what? Many a regiment is filled with fanatics. But no, not like this. Where Krieg believes in their need to atone, it is through sacrifice, but also through victory. The Janissaries believe in the Emperor, and that is it. Deus Imperator Volt. God wills it. It is why they are now truly the bravest of the brave, strongest of the strong, unbreakable, unstoppable. And if the Ministorum ever realize the power now at their command, it could be over for all of the other Lords of Terror, for the Lion and the Avenging Sun. Let us hope they remain as most ardent, courageous, and unbreakable forces for the good of the Imperium. For we cannot forget the events of the Psychic Awakening. The galaxy has changed forever. The end times approach, and the veil is thinner. The Cicatrix Maledictum is open. The Orcs hear the drums of Gork and Mork and mass across the void. The Necrons arise and reclaim their old holdings, giving quarter to none. The Tyranids attack the galaxy with their never-ending rapaciousness. Now they form base planets. They will not be leaving. The Eldar flock to the colours of war. The aspects and the jesters' masks are taken like an avalanche. The Ranadandra has begun. The tear across the galaxy floods it with the power of the warp, but also with the realization of prayers and curses, as the God Emperor begins to finally manifest and bless his people in battle. The King in Yellow plots in his hidden domain. The forces of chaos are not only abroad, but increasing in power every second. With each world they conquer, they engorge their numbers, their reach, and their martial majesty. With the Psychic Awakening, the powers of Psychers, priests, and paladins have forever been magnified. The advent of the long-prophesied awakening of the human psychic gene and the elevation of the human soul has arrived. Alpha-class Psychers will be born in ever greater numbers. Perhaps they will be even more powerful than that. But will the Primarchs unify and harness this power, or will it truly be the end of all life as we know it? And there are further threats coming, returning. The other Xenos gather. The forces of Chaos muster. The end times are now. Oh, go on. Now surely that was worth a subscribe. A like at least, eh? Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.